Hey, everybody. Welcome to Energy, Connection, and Courage at Work. I'm Rebecca.
And I'm Natalie.
And we are here today with our friend and colleague, Lorraine Williams.
Hi, guys.
Lorraine and Natalie and I are going to have a great conversation today with you about empathy. And I'm going to first define it so we're all on the same page in terms of what we're talking about, because the more that we do this work around energy, connection, and courage, the more we realize that empathy is really the foundation of making all conversations and relationships go better. And also, most of us don't have a real good handle on what empathy is and what it isn't. So just to kick us off, empathy as the way, in terms of the way we define it, is leaving other people feeling felt. It's making space for other people's emotions without needing to judge them or dismiss them. And it's listening to other people and believing their truth, even if it isn't your truth or it wouldn't be your truth in that situation. So, Lorraine, what I love about today's conversation is that we thought about working together with you on this conversation because a couple of years ago, we heard you say something like that when you were a younger professional, you didn't have a lot of self-awareness and didn't practice empathy, and that's been kind of part of your life's journey. So I wondered if you could tell us that story.
I didn't have a lot of empathy as a young adult, and I paid for it. So I would say that for me, empathy begins with awareness, right? So being aware of how you show up, being aware of your surroundings. And like many folks, especially young folks, I wasn't very aware when I was younger. I was more self-centered, I guess. I don't even like the word self-centered, but I guess I was more self-centered. And as I moved through the workforce over the years, I started to learn empathy. I started to see it practiced. And I saw the results that one would get from being empathetic. And like anything else, it's a skill. I worked hard at it, and I've worked very hard at it over the last 10 years. And I feel because of that, I've been extremely more successful than I could have ever been without it.
Lorraine, do you have any examples that you could share with us of a time when that was happening?
Yeah, being in the workforce, I actually worked for an organization with 1,400 people that I've not long come out of. And when you're working with that amount of people, there's an opportunity for empathy every day. There's an opportunity to display empathy, and there's also huge opportunities to have empathy misses. As the executive director, I had 16 people working for me, and I was practicing empathy probably on a daily basis. And one story in particular comes to mind right now. We were hiring for a position, a service desk position. We hired a whole bunch of people, and we selected one gentleman. He ticked all of the boxes, and he came to work for us. And I think maybe, 4-6 weeks in, I had a meeting with him just to go over some generalities in the workplace. And one of those items on the list was asking him to do a Myers-Briggs assessment along with core values, which I did on all of my people, including myself. It's a great starting point, right? It takes the guessing out of things. And he looked at me and said, well, I'd rather not. I respectfully decline. Well, 10 years ago, I know I probably would have said something along the lines of, okay, next, and gone on and looked for the next person and told him if he respectfully declined, then he'd probably need to find a job elsewhere. But that's not the case today. I was able to take a deep breath and step back and realize that something was going on with this individual. So I gave him space. And I remember saying something to the effect that, okay, all right, well, I'm thinking there's a good reason why you're respectfully declining. And maybe we can talk about that. It would be nice if we can discuss it more within the next 24 to 48 hours. And he seemed calm enough. And the very next day, he came knocking at my office door and said he was ready to talk. And again, I was willing to sit and really listen to this individual to understand where he was actually coming from. And he explained to me in great detail that he had come from an employment that was extremely toxic and manipulative. And he'd made a vow to himself that from this point forth, he was going to share as little as possible about himself with anybody in the workforce. So that's where that came from. I went on to explain to him that it was very different where he worked now, and we were a team, and we certainly were not toxic. However, it was going to take time for him to realize that. So I was going to give him time, and I asked him if he would be willing to work with the individuals and address this item in 6 months, I think we said. And 6 months came, and I approached him, and he was like a very different person altogether. I remember him walking into my office, and I asked him about the Myers-Briggs, and his response was so different than the first day. He said something like, "Oh, yeah, of course, I'll do it. Send me the paperwork." So that was due to leading in and realizing that somebody had an issue, and it was up to me to figure out what it was and give them a container in which to express themselves. And I found things like that happening almost daily with individuals.
Lorraine, that's such a good way to put it. I love that phrase that you just used, which is to provide a container for people to, what did you just say? Process their experience or experience their emotions or something. I love this idea of empathy being the ability to create a container between you and I where you can experience whatever you're experiencing without judgment and without me having to dismiss it or move you through it too quickly.
And the gift from that was he and I had a really good connection. It creates connection, right? So we know empathy fuels connection. And afterwards, we had a really good relationship. So not only is being empathetic kind, of course it's being kind, and I think we owe it to people, but if you want good results, then show empathy.
Lorraine, one of the things I hear, I think loud and clear in your story is a lot of self-awareness, and self-awareness in that moment where you're speaking with a person, asking them to complete an assessment, and they say no. And maybe your first reactive instinct was, well, guess you're not a good candidate for this job, or you're out of line. But in that moment, you had enough self-awareness to know maybe that's not going to serve us well. And maybe I need to give this person some space to think about it and seek to understand. And it makes me really curious about, was there ever a time where that self-awareness didn't exist? And maybe you had a lesson in, wow, that didn't work out very well. And maybe having self-awareness and empathy in that situation could have served me, but I learned from the experience that my lack of self-awareness didn't serve me well.
Oh, I think there were many occasions where I didn't show empathy and the results were bad or not so good. One that comes to mind right now is my meetings. So we would have a Teams meeting on a weekly basis. And for many years, every Wednesday, we'd have a Teams meeting. I was the head of the table, and we'd have 16 people around the table. Right there, that wasn't a good idea, but I'll park that for a second. Me being the head of the table wasn't a good idea. IT, a lot of introverts in IT. And I just happen not to be an introvert, right? I'm an extrovert. So I would ask questions. And when I would hear nothing but silence, I would find myself getting really frustrated. And I would make comments like, okay, guys, don't all speak at once. Well, it got me absolutely nowhere. I mean, when you really understand people and you start to understand who you are, who other people are, different experiences, and you build space for people. Oh my goodness, I look back and I think of those times and the cringeworthy times, right? I cringe at the thought of saying that to individuals. Did I get results? Of course I didn't. I just get more silence. So I would find things happen like that on a daily basis. And as I got older, hopefully I'd like to think I got wiser and my self-awareness muscle grew stronger. And I started to practice at the beginning of almost any interaction. Take a few seconds and just fractions of a second to think, what am I doing? Am I listening? Am I leaning in? Am I reading the room? And those seconds, those fractions of a second will pay off in ACEs every single time.
Lorraine, one of the things that often comes up for people in our trainings is that people can begin to see the value of empathy, even people who aren't, naturally good at empathy. But one of the things that comes up for a lot of people is that empathy is easier to practice when it's someone you like or respect or admire, but harder to practice when you're in an interaction with someone who gets under your skin or kind of rubs you the wrong way. We all have those people. So I'm curious, what do you do when you're finding it hard to connect with empathy with someone who kind of gets under your skin or rubs you the wrong way, or whose perspective is just very different than yours?
Yeah, that's. I think that's hard for all of us, right? Because, well, it's tough when you're working with somebody or talking to somebody who you don't connect with initially, and it's harder to connect with. I have a mantra when I go into conversations, and as I just pointed out before, I ask myself, am I being aware? Am I listening to understand? Right? So, am I listening to understand? And the end result is understanding. I want to understand this person, not necessarily agree. Agreement's low on my list in a lot of cases, but understanding is key. And if I feel that I'm getting nowhere with the individual, because one party can be showing empathy while the other party isn't. So sometimes it's a total mismatch. But if I find I'm not getting anywhere, I'll try to take a pause and just allow the other person to talk. We don't have to agree with the other party. But I think for me, in displaying empathy, understanding is everything.
I love the idea that you can practice empathy and not agree at the same time.
Yes, it's important.
I'm really learning myself in listening to Lorraine, and I'm curious about, Lorraine, how do you know when you've reached a point where you say, I don't agree, but I now understand? Like, does something happen within you, within the other person? Is it a feeling? Is it like, how do you know when you've reached that point of understanding?
It's interesting because I don't always know when I've reached that point, but in most cases, again, it's practice. And when you feel like you're on this hamster wheel and you're just going around and around and around, sometimes you just need to step back. And if it's an employee, if it's in the workplace, for instance, this is a good time to say, okay, I don't think we're getting anywhere right now. I think emotions might be heightened. Let's take a break. Let's take a break and let's pick up again tomorrow. If it's something that is important, that needs to be done or taken care of, we can do that more in the workplace, right? So let's just pick this up tomorrow when we're not as empathetically fatigued, maybe, right? When we can come at it with a clearer outlook. So that happens often. I also find that some individuals, not often, but it does happen where you are having an interaction with somebody and they won't listen and they keep talking over you and they're talking at you. And that's hard, right? And it's frustrating. So I normally make a little deal up front before we get together. I've done this so many times in the workplace where somebody's come in and it's, we're going to have an interaction. And I've said to them, okay, I know we need to talk. I know you'd like to talk to me. So it's dialogue, right? So are we both on the same page that this is dialogue and not monologue, which means I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to really lean in and listen to you. And then it's going to be my turn. And I hope that you can really listen to me. And then we're going to go back and forth. And if I set the stage sometimes, which it's, like I said, it's easier to do in the workplace than to do with somebody out on the street, then that normally works because we're priming the individual that I'm going to listen to you. I want to see you. I want to hear you. I want to feel you. And I hope that you will reciprocate.
I keep thinking about how energy and connection and courage all play a part in this conversation around empathy, because I've heard so many examples in what you've said, Lorraine. Everything from wow, where is each individual's energy when they have this conversation? Are they in a good place, especially mentally and emotionally to start with? I've heard you mention a couple times the importance of, what if I'm having a conversation with a person, and maybe this is your example where there hasn't been connection established yet. And that might be a different conversation than establishing empathy with, what Rebecca mentioned, with someone that you trust and respect, and they don't get under your skin. And then the courage it takes to actually be responsive and lean in and recognize that you need to seek to understand and maybe not seek to agree. And I've just heard so many examples of all three of those playing a big part in creating empathy.
Absolutely. I think if we practice empathy, because it's something that we have to practice, it's a behavior that develops over time. I think if we practice it really well and we go in intentionally to practice empathy, we breed courage, right? It creates connection. We know that. So it's the right energy because we're going in there with the right energy. And we are creating that connection. And it gives the other party the courage to speak up. When somebody, as you mentioned earlier, Rebecca, feels felt, right? When somebody feels felt, then there's nothing better, right? There's nothing warmer than feeling felt. And I think that it clearly breeds connection, but it also breeds courage.
Yeah, it does. It's like it makes the conditions in which people are much more likely to do the brave thing, the thing that feels a little risky and brave. So, Lorraine, that's a good segue because, as you know, we wrap our podcast with a couple things, and one of them is the one big thing. And the one big thing is an idea, a practice, a strategy that our audience could take away from today. So, if you had to name one big thing that you might offer our audience to practice around empathy or to consider, what would that one thing be?
So here's my one big thing. Before you go into an interaction or a conversation, think beforehand and ask yourself, what emotion am I going in with? Am I being aware? Am I willing to listen to the other individual, to listen to understand, right? And that was 2 points, by the way. And point number 3 is have the end result in mind, which is understanding. So to be aware, to listen, and to go in with the end result being understanding the other individual. And I would say if you do that prior to every conversation, you are practicing empathy.
I love that. The end aim here is understanding. It's not agreement and it's not being right. My end goal is understanding. Love it. All right. Well, that brings us to my favorite part of the show, and we don't have a good name for this. It used to be the secret or the interesting tidbit, which Natalie said sounds like something your great grandmother would say, or what I don't know what the name of it is. But Lorraine, this is the part in our podcast where we each share something about ourselves that most other people don't know. It could be something big, something little, something funny, something serious.
I'm happy to go first. Well, because I was thinking about this morning, and I'm going to give a little bit of a twist to this because it's certainly something interesting that people don't know, but it's not really a fact about me. It's something that I've noticed is happening lately, and I don't know why it's happening, but I like it so much, and it has to do with travel. Rebecca and I were just talking about before we got on the podcast that we were both struggling with travel and getting in we both got in at midnight last night and had to drive home, and I've had a lot of issues happening lately with flights delayed and flights canceled, and I might miss my layover. And something that has been happening right alongside with all of that unexpected stress that's happening is I've noticed different companies are going above and beyond in trying to serve their customers. So, for example, a couple of weeks ago, just out of the blue, I think, Lorraine, I told you about this. I'm checking into a Hyatt to go work for one of our clients. And I don't know why, but they upgraded me to the penthouse suite and brought me wine and champagne and cheese. And I was like, what is this? I'm not asking any questions. I had a living room and an office and all of this. The other thing that happened this week was I was landing in Houston on a layover, and I was going to have to sprint to make my connection. And I knew I was going to have to sprint. And as we land and I'm trying to get through people, and they said, you're only one gate away. You might make it. You might make it. I get a text from the airline that says, breathe, take a breath. We're holding the flight for you. I was like, what? You're holding the flight for me? And then the other thing that happened is right after that happened, and they held the flight for me. And I love that they led with, take a breath, breathe. We're holding the flight for you. I check into my hotel that night, much later than expected, and they said, congratulations, you're our elite member of the day. And they hand me this card that says, we appreciate you. We welcome you. It was in San Antonio, and they drew this picture and they said, go to the bar and have 2 drinks on us. I'm like,
Wow.
what is happening? Like,
That's beautiful.
So it just, it's beautiful. And it's also like, wow, I've been trying to lean in, and I took pictures of all these things. I'm like, why all these nice things are happening right alongside all this stress. And it just really changes the way I feel about travel. And I thought that was interesting because it's all happened so recently to me. And I hope I didn't break the spell by sharing it today. I hope it keeps happening.
That's the universe providing balance and just giving you the same thing that you put out into the world.
That's beautiful.
Which is goodness. Mine's a lot simpler than that. Mine is that David and I got bees.
Oh, yes.
Natalie knows this, but nobody else does. I won't say long, but we got our first little colony of bees, and they're in our backyard in their hive that Dave built. And it's so cool. And I'm learning so much about bees and honey. And for those of you listening, if you don't know how amazing bees are, just go do some quick research. They're awesome little creatures. We call them the gals because most of the worker bees are girls, I think.
Gals. Yeah, I love that. I love that. Yeah, that is the way it is. And I love it. Yeah. Well, mine's probably boring compared to both of you. I'm pretty nomadic. I would say nomadic. And I don't know if a lot of people know this, but I was born in the UK and I lived in the UK through my adult life. And then I moved to Germany and lived there for 17 years. So, it's interesting because when people hear that, they go, really? You were in Germany for 17 years? That's a long time.
Do you speak German, Lorraine?
Ja, spreche Deutsch. Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Oh, I did not know it.
So there you go. Maybe that's my one thing that, I speak German.
Hey, can you close out the podcast by saying like goodbye, everybody, or goodbye all or something in German?
So vielen Dank und bis nächstes Mal. Auf Wiedersehen.
Yay!
Love it. Thanks, Lorraine.
Yeah, thank you guys. It was a pleasure. Yeah. It was lovely being here.
I'm Rosie Ward, and this is Show Up as a Leader. To learn more, head over to peopleforwardnetwork.com and, of course, hit that follow button.